Raising a well-behaved child in this world requires strict discipline and punishment. Today, we will look...
No, we will not.
Hello, and welcome to Childproof. I'm Tori Phantom.
And I'm Gwenna Lakeland, and this episode goes out to everyone feeling overwhelmed by just being on the internet.
And to everyone who has become the personification of that dog in a burning room that just says, this is fine.
This is fine.
This is fine. Yeah, existing as a person is hard.
It is hard.
Yeah. And it is so difficult to show up the way we want to when, you know, the room is on fire and we're all just trying to say, this is fine.
Right. The room's on fire. I still actually have to pay for the room. So clear on out so mama can pay the rent.
Yeah. So this week we're going to talk about empathy.
Empathy.
But first, we got to start the timer.
So the other day I was online, as one with a chronic internet addiction is.
Yeah, of course. Relatable.
I was online and I scrolled across a video of a woman who was showing a dance that she made up. And this woman, her dance was not very good, but she was having fun with it. She was enjoying herself.
Right.
And showing what it is that she had figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And she filmed it in her space that was, without judgment, very messy.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very messy space. The floors clearly needed vacuums. There were haphazard stacks of stuff. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a hoarder space, but it's a little cuspy. It was right there. And I, like an idiot, clicked into the comments.
Oh.
Like just very slowly. And here's the thing is my naive ass went, oh, they're just going to say stuff about her dance. The entire comment section was about her space. Why is she dancing instead of cleaning? Why does her space look like this? She has better things to do. And then, you know, they're still making fun of the dance and they're making fun of the way she moved and they're making fun of her joy.
Mean.
It was awful. It was awful. And it's not, I don't have to describe the general vibe of this because every single one of us have opened a comment section.
Well, and every single one of us knows when we see the comments have been turned off on something, that something happened here.
Something happened
and
here.
what happened there, to be clear, is that someone got very, very hurt.
Yeah. And someone else lacked empathy entirely.
Yeah.
And here's
because
the thing
it's
is
so
that,
easy to leave rude, judgmental, cruel comments when you don't know someone, when you are detached from it, and when everyone else is piling on.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I saw it. I saw that the dance was not solid, but I also saw that she was bringing herself joy. Yes, I saw that her space was very messy, but also the comment section got so fucking close. Why is she dancing instead of cleaning her space? Is it maybe because the dancing is easier and more approachable than the absolute overwhelm that is cleaning a space?
Right. And that's, I think, a thing folks often fail to consider when they are seeing things that kind of put up these flags for them of like, this isn't what I would normally see. And they just hop into judgment. That's the easier thing to do. But the easiest way isn't the best way. And realistically, I think all of us know that when our spaces get out of control, whether it be to that level or much less, when it's out of control for us, it got that way because we're struggling with something. Yeah. And when you are already struggling to then consider to do something, that overwhelm can be debilitating.
It absolutely can.
Maybe dancing for a minute can kind of motivate us to move and do the thing we need to do because we are giving ourselves that space to experience a positive feeling for a second.
Well, and even so, even if that's the case, sometimes, yes, we danced because that was doable in the moment. It was that or sit in utter paralysis. So dance is still preferable. But the other opportunity that we as human beings have is to present that person with empathy, with empathy in the comment section. We can approach them with, hey, I know how you feel. I love that I can see your joy. Oh my God, that was not hard. I didn't have to lie.
It seemed really hard, honestly. It seemed like you really struggled there. So I don't believe you that it wasn't hard.
So
that was
let's take a step
sarcasm.
back.
I want to be really clear.
Let's take a step back. First, what is empathy?
Empathy.
That I feel like this is education that we don't really get. I certainly didn't. I didn't learn until I was a damn adult. What I heard the word, but I didn't understand the word.
Right. And so I'll tell you that one thing that I did today is I decided to bring actual information. I did some research so I could give you a real definition.
This is translated to they Googled 32 seconds before we started recording.
It's true. So we have 3 major levels of empathy. Being cognitive empathy, which is the ability to understand another person's thoughts or beliefs. Emotional empathy, which is the ability to feel what another person feels emotionally. And compassionate empathy, which is doing something about another's distress. So empathy is really about trying to understand someone else and their experience, their beliefs, how they could be experiencing something that is so drastically different than how you experience things.
The way empathy is a learned skill.
Yes.
Putting yourself into someone else's shoes is a learned skill. And that's the other thing that pisses me off about having been raised a millennial is the generations that came before us got so close to explaining empathy without actually using the word.
Or using empathy a lot of times.
Listen, where's the trauma button?
Trauma dump.
So growing up, we had a lot of, walk a mile in his shoes. That's empathy.
Or the golden rule, right?
Like the definition of, but y'all never put those words together. Y'all wanted me to consider what another person was feeling or experiencing, but you didn't front load that language. So anyway,
and I do think there is like a generational divide with that when it comes to parenting. I think that in a lot of ways that we as parents believe and know it to be true that our kids are capable of higher levels of understanding. And that is, I mean, even tied to empathy. Literally yesterday, I had my littlest lady at the eye doctor and we were just talking about her school day. And she was telling me that in their art class that her class was, they were not behaving the way they should have. Everyone was talking when they shouldn't have, and it was upsetting to the art teacher. And I asked, I said, well, were you talking when you shouldn't have been? And she was like, yeah, a little, because my friends were talking to me, and I did want to talk to my friends. So, and so one, celebrate the honesty, because that's how we continue that behavior. And then we had a discussion about respect and empathy and integrity. Integrity, much like empathy, is a word that we heard but was never defined for us, but would be shown to us in other ways. But I lay it out for my kids in this way, that integrity is doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, even when no one is watching and even when no one else is. And I brought that empathy into it because that's a thing for me as a parent that I think is really important, is to challenge our kids to be empathetic, because it is a skill we can grow and build. And
and the simplest way to challenge that empathy is just the simple question: how would you feel if? Repeat the scenario that they just gave. How would you feel if you're trying to focus on your schoolwork and your friend won't stop talking to you?
And that's exactly where I went with it. I said, you've told me before when your class gets really loud that it's overwhelming for you and that you've missed things you needed to hear. So do you want to be a part of that for one of your friends? And how do you think your art teacher felt? Don't you think your art teacher might have felt really overwhelmed too by a whole bunch of little kids going crazy? And in that way, we're challenging that empathy. And then what I also like to do with that is, what can we do different next time?
Well, and I need you to understand, when we say that kids have higher level understanding, in the exact same form, my youngest child, the girl child, has entered her friendship bracelet era. Okay. So it's Raver Candy or Taylor Swift bracelets or friendship bracelets, whatever you want to call. I have a giant tub of pony beads living in my house now.
Same.
So the girl child wanted to get the beads out, and she was going through a list of all of the friends she was going to make a bracelet for, which in no way, shape, or form was she actually going to accomplish making all these bracelets in the 15 minutes we had for her to play with the pony beads. But she starts going through, I'm going to get one for this friend and this friend and this friend, but I'm not going to make a bracelet for Tucker with a Y. I've changed this child's name. But Tucker with a Y apparently has some struggles in class. Tucker with a Y is working really hard in remembering how to behave in a classroom setting. And so we hear a lot of the antics of Tucker with a Y, which honestly sound like very 6-year-old antics. We're not talking, life-altering things. But then she stops, and I was about to say something to her, but then she stops and she goes, no, Tucker with a Y needs a bracelet because I wouldn't like if everyone else got a bracelet and I didn't. So I'm going to make Tucker with a Y a bracelet. Okay. Yeah. I didn't have to say shit to you. All right. Good job, kid. Make Tucker with a Y that bracelet.
You've said enough.
I know.
That she got there on her own. Yeah. And that's a thing that we encounter as well. And it's when we're hearing about these behaviors of, a kiddo who is struggling in the classroom, it's, I wonder why they might be struggling.
Yeah.
Because I bet that they're probably struggling somewhere else too, because not everyone's home life is your home life. We don't know what's going on.
Right.
They could have had a really hard time. We don't know. And since we don't know, and it's not our business to know, we just have to try to give these people the benefit of the doubt.
Well, and that's the other thing that I think everyone needs to remember is that a lot of times what we are seeing is a snippet, a small percentage of what's going on in that person's life. For Tucker with a Y, I don't know anything about his home life. I don't know anything about any diagnosis. It's a good thing I talk for a living.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about any diagnoses he may carry. I don't know anything about his mental health, about his parenting situation, about his nutrition or medical situation. All of those things could be influencing why Tucker with a Y is really struggling in class right now.
Yeah.
To the point that I hear about Tucker with a Y's exploits. But that's something that I constantly have to remind them. We don't know. And that's something that I think more grown-ups on the internet need to recognize. Yeah. We don't know what's going on.
And we don't know that person.
No.
I myself used a slew of hate comments in my own comment section to have a really, because like there's certain platforms where you're more likely to land in the wrong side, and then
Facebook.
Yeah, I'm talking about Facebook. I am.
It's always Facebook.
So
this mama cusses, Tori Phantom.
And so I had.
Please don't show us empathy in our comment section because we don't get it from anyone else.
So I'd shared this like old hair video where I did like a transition to a sound. Yeah. And it didn't. It was a good mix, right? So some people were like, "Wow, I really liked this video. I really love the hair." And then some people were like, I hate you. You're awful. You disgusting excuse for a human. I don't know anything about you. I hadn't even watched the video. You're just all. I hate you. And I was like,
my favorite is when I get a slew of hate comments from the first half of the video, and then like in the second half of the video, I answered all of those complaints. But yeah, go off, Brett.
Yeah. And so like these people were like not even commenting, on the context of the video, which was a 10-second video. They were just like, you're
the attention
stupid.
Span of ants.
Yeah. They just looked at my hair and were like, you're clearly awful. I hate you. And I was like, I get it.
Same.
It's fine. But so I'm reading through this, right? Like there's a lot of them. And I'm like, I have an opportunity here. So I went and grabbed my eldest kid, who is not yet on social media, but we're nearing that age that we have discussed previously as to when that can happen. And we have a rule about training wheels with social media. So once we can make an account without having to lie about what year we're born, that's the rule. There's going to be
that's step one of several.
Step one. And so what I do is I've considered this to be training wheels. This is my plan, which is subject to change because I'm not there yet. And essentially no assumption of privacy until we feel together that you are capable of independently navigating this space safely. And so what I did is, because we've had a million conversations about this, but as we're nearing that age, they are getting, more involved. And so what I did, I showed my kid this video. And I said, so you see this video I made? I said, what do you think of it? And they're like, it's all right. It's fine. Yeah. It's just a hair video. And I was like, yeah, I agree. It's not anything spectacular. So let's read the comments together. And so we did. And we went through, and it was like this moment of noticing, like, yeah, like at least half of the people were really nice in this comment section. But no amount of the people who were nice makes it possible to ignore the vitriol in my comment section. Yeah. And so what I said to my kid is, like, I am 32 years old, and I am fortunate enough to have put in the time to be in a place where I'm okay with myself. Like, I accept myself, and I am okay with who I am. So these comments, while now and then it can kind of like bother me, they're not changing my feelings about myself. They are not interfering with my self-esteem. My brain is fully developed. I am not in the most insecure years of my life right now. Right. And so I use this as like an example to tell my kid, like, this here, I don't want you to have to navigate this alone, because if you are sharing things publicly, public opinion can suck. Yes. And
it can be wrong.
Yes. And I mean, I think it was on my video personally.
I agree. It was wrong.
Yeah. I don't think I'm that
your hair's
bad.
Weird, but
yeah, that's on purpose. So mission accomplished. But it was like this moment of being able to connect with my kid over how much these strangers hated me, which was like, weird thing.
Right, hit the trauma button again. Hit the trauma up.
Trauma dump.
So my kid actually ended up thanking me. And it was like, I was like, wow, thanks for the Full House moment, haters.
Every once in a while, both Tori and I's life just looks like a damn 90s sitcom.
Yeah. That's where I got a lot of my idea of what a family could be when I was a kid. I'd hit the trauma button again, but it might be a little much. So just have some empathy for me, okay?
All right. So now I do want to take a second to discuss where the end of empathy comes, because I feel like there are times that we're like, oh, well, we need to be empathetic. Yeah, we do need to be empathetic. We don't understand, or perhaps we do understand.
And you know what else we need? Boundaries.
We need boundaries, right? Because empathy can sometimes hurt us, and it can hurt the person that we are being empathetic to. Let me explain. So when the empathy hurts us, it's because we hit absolute mental overwhelm, which I feel is endemic on the internet, especially if you voted Harris. If you voted Harris, everywhere you look on the internet is something that you understand what that person is feeling. You know how and why they are scared. You know how and why they are concerned. You know how and why they are frustrated. You understand, even if you don't. I am a very white American citizen. You know who's never going to fuck my day over? ICE. They're never going to fuck my day over. But my empathy means I understand anyone with even a little bit more melanin than me may be impacted, whether they are an immigrant or not. So I understand how fear and frustration are painting every decision you make from the moment you go to leave your house. I understand, even though it's not a shared experience.
Even though it's something that you understand in a way that you can't relate to.
Correct.
And so
I don't know what that is.
And that's the thing, I think, that we learn how to do over time, and that we are trying to teach our kids as they are growing, is that we don't have to fully understand something to be respectful.
Yes.
And we don't have to understand something to care.
Right. But there does come a point where I have to stop and I have to address my empathetic guilt. I can't help with this. I don't have the resources. I am not in the space. I don't even live in the region where this horrible thing is happening. I understand what it is to lose your house. I live in Tornado Alley. Now, I understand as best I can. I have never lost my house, so that needs to be spoken, but I've survived 2 of the largest tornadoes on the fucking globe. I was in buildings that got torn up by those tornadoes. So I understand what that means, but I can't do anything to help from where I am to all the people impacted by the LA fires. I can talk about it. I can help raise funds. I can donate, but that doesn't feel like enough.
Yeah.
So I've got empathetic guilt there. There's empathetic shame. I'm not able to help. I don't have the resources or the spoons or the ability. There's empathetic anger. This shouldn't even be a fucking issue.
That's where I've been right now.
This shouldn't even be something we're arguing about or worrying about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is I think it's important to communicate that talking about how we feel these things or that these things can be felt is not us saying that you should just stop caring. That's not
correct.
What we're saying is that we can care about what's happening, but we also have to take care of ourselves too.
Correct. We can't help anything if we become a giant quivering flaming puddle of
And I would know, because that's where I end up a lot of times. And I'm not functional in those moments.
But that's the point at which, and for a person who has practiced empathy and has made it a point to choose kindness as often as possible, when everything feels like it's on fire and we're that dog in the meme, we have to acknowledge it is okay that I am in empathetic guilt or empathetic anger or empathetic confusion. What the fuck am I supposed to do to help?
I think it is so important what you just said, because I think a lot of times people, when they hear this idea of validating what they're feeling to themselves, for themselves, it almost feels like this cliche, silly thing of like, why would I do that? Like, that just, what's that going to change? But what it changes is that you are, when you accept things, you can do something else.
Yeah.
Because if you are trying to push this feeling away, if you are trying to ignore what you're experiencing, then it doesn't go away. It condenses. And when things condense, it makes it more.
Yeah.
So it's helpful to be able to validate what you're experiencing to yourself. Have you
ever tried an extract? Have you ever taken a taste of any of the flavor extracts, especially the natural ones, like an almond or a vanilla extract? So you've taken a taste. It is so incredibly overwhelming, the almond taste in an almond extract or the vanilla-ness.
And it stays.
It stays. It pervades everything. 3 hours later, you take a bite of garlic toast and it still tastes like fucking almonds. That is what happens when you take all of this empathy and you cram it down. You are distilling it and distilling it and distilling it until the very core of what that is so strong. You can't feel or function anything else. If you drill down into how angry everything is making you, and you cram it and you distill it and you make a little angry extract, when you open that bottle, that's all you're going to be able to feel about everything. If we aren't able to compartmentalize and go, I understand how you're feeling, but I have to draw a boundary of how much I can help you through this.
Yes. And the boundary, it doesn't have to be a permanent full stop. Like, okay, correct. I've reached my limit and I am done engaging with this forever. No, it's, I need to just take a second so that I can show back up in this space, because if we are losing ourselves in this empathy and wanting to do something and trying to be supportive and we've lost ourselves, well, we can't show up for other people if we've lost ourselves. Right. And so it's that boundary. I want to expand upon what that can mean, because I think a lot of times boundaries are looked at a full stopping point.
Full stop.
But
no
boundaries
further.
can be about balance as well. And that is important. Like, you are important too. And that is not to say, like, don't care about these things, don't give it as much time. It's to say, make sure you're taking care of you too.
So my husband and I have our kids get home at 3:00 in the afternoon. At 2:00 in the afternoon, my husband and I purposefully put our phones down. we stop consuming any major media for about an hour before the kids get home, because we don't want to have been scrolling while we're waiting for the bus to roll up, read something infuriating and be like, "Hi kids, how's your day at school?" We cut ourselves off about an hour. And that is a boundary. I'm going to get back to the news cycle. I'm going to open TikTok back up. I'm going to go watch Under the Desk News and see whatever inane thing has happened in the last hour. But for the hour before, we recognize we need at least an hour of disconnecting. That doesn't necessarily mean we stop working. We just stop looking at the places most likely to make us mad.
Yeah, no, I saw this thread earlier that said being a parent in today's age is so wild because during the day we're calling our representatives and we're planning protests, and then we pick our kids up and we're like, really? The tire swing broke today?
We're having beef stroganoff for dinner, kids. Don't ask me how much I paid for the groceries.
Oh, oh man. Yeah, that's a thing. I've accidentally like Pavloved myself because I've told you of this new system I started where when I am learning something that is upsetting, I balance that for myself by after I have learned this thing that is important to know, I go and I learn French. And so now every time I hear bad news, I just start thinking about speaking French. Like I'm just thinking my thoughts in French now. And I'm like, oh, I did that. I've learned so much French in the last couple of weeks. I'll tell you what.
I have found whole new comfort in my bed. I bought myself an electric blanket for the first time because my reward for doing all the things that I did for the day, helping in all the places that I could help and leaving all the nice comments that I could leave is to bed rot.
I'd support it.
I crawl into the bed, I turn on my electric blanket, and I watch Frasier.
I spend my
time back with Frasier,
sitting on my couch under my art supplies, drawing my history cards, and watching TV. I have never been a big TV person, but recently, like I have realized, like bedtime, I need to disconnect from social media because I will keep myself up all night, just intaking all of this information. And so now I watch TV, which is new. But
also, audiobooks really, really help. But these are all examples of healthy boundaries that don't require we stick our head in the sand.
Yes.
That don't require we fully check out. It's when we recognize we're wandering into empathetic shame. I'm not able to help. I can't do anything about this.
And because of the way that the algorithms work is when you're engaging in this stuff and you're taking in the information, now you've gone down a rabbit hole and an hour and a half later, you're sitting there like shaking. Right. And that's not helping anyone. And so it could be helpful to take in the information you can and then figure out what we could do to bring it back to the types of empathy. We take in the information to learn what's going on, and then we find a way to engage in that compassionate empathy. What can we actually do about it? Because just constantly watching the upsetting stuff isn't helping us engage in compassionate empathy. And that's a different balance,
and keep in mind,
too.
we can wage emotional war on ourselves by watching.
Yeah, I know I do.
When I first became a mom, I realized I can no longer watch any sort of account or video of a child dealing with cancer. For whatever reason, that guts me. It is a massive fear of mine. I think it's a massive fear of most parents.
No, I mean, one of my kiddos has a rare genetic disorder that predisposes her to childhood cancer. So yeah, I get it. I
can't watch it. I felt so bad, but this was a protection that I had to give myself because I was committing war crimes against my own emotional state. A family that I had been following did all the right things as far as shielding their child's, identity and giving them privacy and autonomy. They announced that their kiddo has been diagnosed with an awful cancer, like the kind of awful cancer where this child is unlikely to see their adulthood. That kind of cancer. And I was like, immediately, I need to mute you. I cannot. For my own emotional health,
Yeah.
I cannot. And I'm aware of them. So every once in a while I check. And honestly, good news. The kid is doing really, really good and responding really well to treatments. But I can't watch those updates in real time. I have to choose to engage with those.
Yeah.
You can't just throw them at me.
Right. And I think that's like a healthy way to approach it. And of course it depends on what we're talking about. Different subjects are going to impact us and impact our communities differently. And so the way we engage with them is going to be different too. And I think that it's important that we are constantly exploring the nuance of these things because we can't just blanket statement everything under the same category because that's also not helping anyone or anything.
Well, and something that I've been working with my mom on this. My mom is the boomeriest boomer. She's not a Karen. I'll give her that. She has some Karen tendencies, but when you point them out, she's like, oh, yep, sorry.
Well, and I'll say, here's a different boundary, specifically because you brought up Karens. When we're talking about empathy, because we were talking about telling our kids, for the kids who are struggling in the classroom, we're extending this empathy of, I wonder what they're dealing with. And I think it's okay when we're talking about other adults, especially who are behaving in very childish ways, right? And
they are very unempathetic,
they are causing damage emotionally or whatever the case may be. I don't spend the time wondering why they're behaving that way. I don't have the empathy there because I do think that we have a responsibility to be aware of the way we're treating people, and so if someone is like screaming at a customer service person, I have empathy for the customer service person in that situation. And so I think that's an okay boundary too. Like I want to be clear that we're not suggesting that you
just
extend all of your empathy and be super kind and nice to people who are causing harm. That's different category. The nuance I just mentioned. Yeah.
We're allowed to punch Nazis.
We should.
That's fine. We're allowed to dislike someone being less than humanitarian to someone else. If you're not going to treat another human as a human, you know what? Fuck you too.
Tolerance doesn't tolerate intolerance.
Right. But there's different courses of action you can handle if you encounter a Karen in the wild being very ew. But
your mom's not a Karen. That's where you start.
My mom's not a Karen. But what she's been working really hard in reminding herself constantly is, I don't have to understand. And I think that is a part of that nuance that we were talking about. You don't have to understand. I'm going to out myself.
Okay.
I am not polyamorous.
I was afraid you were going to out yourself as a Karen. Continue.
So I am not polyamorous. No ounce of me is even remotely curious about polyamory, polycules, or the lifestyle lived by polyamorous people. That means I don't understand why or how anyone would require or desire a relationship with more than one person at a time. That feels overwhelming to me. I don't understand. That doesn't mean that I don't think that other people have healthy, sustainable, successful, polyamorous relationships.
Yeah.
I don't have to understand to support. Love who you love. I didn't choose. I am married to a man. If that had been my choice, it wouldn't have won us. I am in love with a man. I didn't choose that. I love him. Dude.
But I think that's an important part of it is that there's so many things that we don't understand, and we have a few choices here. One, we can be super judgmental and mean about it because we want everyone to be like us.
It's not my lived experience, so it must be wrong.
This is the thing I always tell my kids is, wouldn't it be so boring if everyone was just the same? I would be so bored. I have so much that I get to learn all the time because people are so different, and I love learning. So that's one choice. It's the wrong one. So
that's the non-empathetic one.
Yes,
don't do that.
Don't do that. Another choice we can make. Okay, we can choose to learn. We can choose to try to gain more insight and understanding by doing research on our own and not like treating a person as a museum exhibit and asking them a bunch of questions that are kind of inappropriate. not that part. But the first part, we can decide to learn about something we don't understand, or the third option, which is an easy option that is an okay easy option to take, in my opinion. You could just be respectful. And just accept that experience isn't yours, and that's fine. It doesn't affect you.
I don't have to understand to recognize that the choices you're making, you're not impacting my ability to live. You're not impacting my ability to be happy. You are, in fact, enhancing your own ability to live and be happy.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me. Go for it.
In fact, seeing other people's joy brings me joy.
Yeah.
How cool is that? Love it. Love it. But speaking of joy, Gwenna, I've decided that I want to bring back, because this has been a heavier episode than I thought it was going to be.
Heavier episode.
Yeah. So I think we should end on a lighter note.
Okay.
And bring back our Hyperfocus of the week.
Has your Hyperfocus changed?
It's in the same category, but we've pivoted. Has yours not changed?
No. I am still deep in the crochet. I got deeper.
Valid. That's valid.
I had to go to the craft store yesterday, and I threw a skein of yarn in a woman's face.
What? Elaborate. Please. Do I need to hit the trauma button for that woman?
No. So I decided that I was going to crochet a giant blanket, because why not? I am the type of ADHD that when I discover that I have even a modicum of ability to do a thing, I have decided I can do all of it. All of it.
Yeah, that's.
So I went from crocheting granny squares and barely surviving that to then I did some scarves for my children. And then I decided, you know what? Giant blanket. So I got the big chunky yarn and the absolute unit of a crochet hook.
I am going to take a screenshot of that image of you just holding nothing, and I am going to turn it into very funny pictures, some of which will be appropriate to share on the internet. Other ones will go into your text messages. Sorry, continue. You got your
so we're now on YouTube, and when they say that they're going to make my pictures, we'll post them on our YouTube, only on our YouTube. So if you want to see that, you're going to have to follow Childproof Podcast on YouTube. Anyway, so I am making this giant blanket, and I grossly underestimated how much yarn I would need. So I had to go back to the craft store last night, and I was in a little bit of a hurry. Because first of all, I had to roll in really close to their closing time, not within my 15-minute buffer. If I arrive at a store and it's within 15 minutes of closing time, I will not go inside.
Yeah, same.
I have missed that window. They need to close out. If I arrive at a restaurant,
empathy.
If I arrive at a restaurant and find out that they're closing within an hour, I will also not eat there, because I too have scrubbed an entire grill only to have some asshole walk in with 5 minutes left on the clock. And now I have to make my grill dirty. Fuck you. So that's a boundary of empathy that I set. If I arrive with 15 minutes left till store
miss
closing,
out to be kind to
missed
others.
out.
Yeah.
I don't get to go inside. But anyway, the store closes in about 30 minutes, and I am only there to buy this specific yarn. So I run to the back of the store, I load up the 10 skeins, and these are like massive skeins, right? Because it's a big fluffy blanket. I run up to the front, and I was like, I've got 10 of these. And she goes, I'm so sorry, but you have to take them all out of your cart because I have to make sure there's nothing in there. I was like, oh, okay. So I'm moving fast, and now there are people behind me. So now my ADHD has fully kicked in, right?
There's like never a more stressful moment than when you're trying to put your card back in your wallet.
I'm already amped.
Yeah.
So I'm like throwing them on the counter, and one of the strings catches my finger, so it goes into this flip and just direct impact to this woman's face.
At least it was fluffy.
It was fluffy. It was wrapped in a piece of cardboard, but it was fluffy. She laughed. Oh my God, she saved my laugh by laughing. I was like, I did not mean to throw it. And then I botched the apology too, because I was. So anyway, human being at the craft store who got hit in the face with yellow yarn. I am sorry. I should have had better control of my body and been far more aware of my environment. I failed to do that, and I put us both in an awkward situation. I apologize, and I will try to remember that going fast does not mean it's any more reliable or useful. That's how you apologize, by the way.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. Also, thank you for saying what color the yarn was, because that was going to be my follow-up question. I was waiting. I was trying not to interrupt, but it's important to me.
So your hyperfixation has pivot.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm still in the founding fathers. Come on, but I am currently really, really into the Stamp Act riots.
Okay,
because so you've heard of the Stamp Act, right?
Uh-huh.
It's kind of like it's one of the inaccurate histories we're told is like the Stamp Act is like what directly led to the American Revolution.
Right.
It was part of it. It was a big part of it, but the context there, I won't get into that part. Because what I'll get into is that the Stamp Act was announced, right? And the colonists were like, we don't like this. We're not in right. So what did they do? They wrote strongly worded letters to Parliament. And they were like, hey, like, this isn't fair. And they like gave the reasons. And they were largely ignored by their government. And so then.
That feels familiar.
I know.
Clearly.
I don't know why I'm so into it right now. So then it started, right? Because it was this one dude in Virginia, Patrick Henry, is like, he set off this list of basically like his beliefs about the Stamp Act and how it was unconstitutional and how it wasn't okay. And people were like, traitor, treasonous, this guy does not love our king, right? But other people who were already feeling that, they were like, And so then these other colonies were like, okay, like New York was like, we're going to adopt this too. We are going to engage with this. But then Boston was like, rookie. So what they did is there was this guy, Andrew Oliver, he signed up. He was going to be the Stamp Act. Like he was going to be the stamp collector. He would be the one to get the money and the taxes. And so when he took that position, the Sons of Liberty at Boston, they were like, okay. So one morning they wake up and hanging from the Liberty Tree is an effigy of Andrew Oliver, which is like a scarecrow. If you don't know, they like made him and they like dressed him up and they hung it in the tree, and people came from miles and miles around to come and see it. Like the town is abuzz with people coming to stare at this.
This Andrew Scarecrow.
Yeah. And so then the governor said to the sheriff, he was like, hey, can you go take that down? And so the sheriff's like, yeah, totally, man, I'll go do that. So he goes to do that. And then he returns and he's like, I couldn't do that. And they're like, why? And he was like, I'm pretty sure they would kill me. And so this thing hung in the tree until that night when it did come down, because the colonists took it down. For why? Great question. What they did is they paraded it around the town, and then they brought it to the stamp office that Andrew Oliver had just built. They tore that down by hand. They didn't even have tools. They just tore it down. And then they went to Andrew Oliver's house, who had heard they were coming. So he he ran away. Yeah. And they beheaded the effigy, chucked the head into his yard. They were like, we're going to one up the French Revolution. Like, we're doing it right now. And then they took the rest of it, the body of this effigy, and they threw it into a bonfire. And then when they realized that Andrew Oliver wasn't there, like the governor was there, and they were really mad about it. And they're like, okay, like, you know what we're going to do? We're really worried about this Andrew Oliver guy. So don't worry, governor, we'll start a search party. And I am like underselling how wild these riots were. And then they had more riots a few days later. Anyway, they did end up repealing the Stamp Act without ever having collected taxes on it, because Boston started a trend, and all through the colonies, they started hanging effigies of stamp collectors and officials, and all of the stamp collectors would resign because they were afraid.
Never mind. I don't want to do it. This is a terrible job. Bye.
Yeah. So the Stamp Act was,
that is our timer.
I had more to say. You know what? That's fine. That's fine. Thank you for listening. And when you want to hear more about all of these things, go to my personal YouTube page, Tori Phantom, because my new series,
It's starting very soon.
It's starting very soon, and I plan on talking about the Stamp Act for at least one entire episode, at least.
At least.
There's a lot.
Thank you for listening to Childproof. We want to hear from you. Email us at childproofpodcast@gmail.com. That's childproofpodcast@gmail.com.
And be sure to give us a follow on YouTube, which is at Childproof Podcast, and follow us on your other podcasting platforms too. Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen. Thanks for being
We're still
here.
on there. In fact, we are actively working to being on more places, and we will announce that as we get live on other places. Also, please remember, we still love your ratings. We like reading them. They help move the podcast up the charts, which introduces it to new listeners, and everyone should listen to an episode of Empathy that ends in a gruesome depiction of what happened at the Stamp Act Riots. So that feels necessary in everyone's life.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
And remember, sometimes our kids are the assholes.
And sometimes it's us.
It was always like the Parliament of 1770, though.
Yeah. And Andrew Oliver.
Yeah.